Hey guys, welcome back to the Full Nuance Podcast. It's Maris.
What's up, y'all? It's Andrew. Welcome back.
Today we're here in our next episode in our communication series, and today's episode is all around setting boundaries.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this communication series so far, and boundary setting is something we've definitely had a lot of practice in recent, I would say, years.
Yeah. I would say we've gotten really good at boundary setting probably this year in 2024. Yeah. So setting boundaries in your personal and professional life are so important for a multitude of reasons. My favorite being just learning how to protect your own energy and time and mental headspace. I mean, there's so many benefits to setting boundaries, but it's also probably like one of, if not the most terrifying life skills that I've had to learn in terms of doing it in a really healthy and respectful way.
Oh yeah, definitely. And as like a recovering people pleaser, I feel like it's especially difficult for someone like me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Boundary setting in your personal lives can look like setting boundaries with a family member, like maybe your parents or a sibling, or your friendships, your neighbors, like anyone who has direct access to you.
Yeah.
I would say, like, who has, access to either your physical space or your time or your attention. Like, those are the types of people in your personal life where you might find yourself setting a boundary. And then your professional life, what does that look like, Andrew?
Yeah, so it could look like a boss, coworker. That's if you work at a regular 9-to-5 type job. But if you're a business owner, kind of like us, it looks like clients or could be even vendors too. Not just like clients, people paying you, but people you're paying money to for a service.
Your own employees.
Yeah, exactly.
Your own team, your business partner, the list goes on and on, right? There's tons of people in our lives that have access to us on a daily basis. So how do you set those sort of healthy boundaries in order to protect your time and space, to live a more fulfilled life, and make sure that you're doing what it is that you need to be doing on a daily basis without these constant distractions and interruptions, or worse, people kind of taking advantage of those things that you need to be protecting, like your mental and physical space, and then you find yourself spiraling or dedicating all of this time in places where honestly you just shouldn't be spending your time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So a lot of obstacles can come up. If you're new to this and if you haven't been listening to our past episodes, the framework for all of our podcasts, especially here on YouTube, if you're watching with all the fun pop-ups and little graphics that we've made, we walk through the common obstacles of the lesson and then the opportunities that come with learning that lesson, which kind of leads into the reward and why you would want to learn this bigger lesson.
Then we get into the extended portion of it where we kind of highlight the nitty-gritty tangible steps that you can take to then overcome those obstacles and then reap the benefit of the reward.
Yes, so if you're not yet plugged into the extended, the link to that is in the description box of the YouTube video. We also have access to that on our website just by jumping into the $22.99 a month membership, the Empower membership. That one is going to give you access to all the extended videos and some of those tangible resources that Andrew is talking about. So check that out or reach out to us if for some reason you can't find it. But I'm excited because when we talk about obstacles of getting into boundary setting, this is where I really want you guys to feel from us, exactly how much we resonate with what is so scary about setting boundaries. Because in order for you guys, I feel to feel super confident in setting boundaries with people, we got to work through some of these obstacles together. And then hopefully whenever you hear the opportunities and benefits that come from it, that's just going to solidify for you why you want to start doing this in your life immediately in order for you to feel and reap all those rewards of having these healthy boundaries in place.
Yes.
And if boundary setting is not like taught to you, which I feel like unless you just come from a family where it was super intentional to teach you, like, hey, here's how to set healthy boundaries in order to protect your peace and your time. I don't know how many people like grew up with this, or for me, it was more so like a learned lesson a little bit later for how do you do this and how do you do it in a way that doesn't feel kind of scary.
Yeah, I know for me as a people pleaser, it was very scary for me when I first started setting healthy boundaries, because as we talked about in the previous communication episodes, just expressing my feelings was a challenge, and knowing that aspect. And I feel like boundary setting is like the next level of that. So that's why it's something I think I haven't even addressed till later in life and more recently.
Yeah. So if you listen to kind of like our basic communications episode and then our emotional intelligence episode, that's kind of what Andrew's drawing from, is like, go back and listen to those if you haven't listened to those yet. But that's kind of like where you're overcoming those initial fears and those initial feelings of when you're getting better at communicating your thoughts and your feelings to people. And then boundary setting, we kind of saw as like the logical next episode, because this is where, okay, you're comfortable now communicating your thoughts, especially the good thoughts and the easy thoughts, or quote unquote easy thoughts that you should be able to share with another person. But now we're at the point where, okay, what happens when someone's like crossing a line with you or overstepping, or you feel like you're being overworked and you don't know how to tell your boss this, or you feel like your friend's calling you at all hours of the night because they're going through all this stuff, and so you're having to drop everything you do to like tend to them and listen to them, and you personally acknowledge and understand like, oh, this is taking my time and my energy and I need to be doing other things, and I just feel like I'm giving to these other situations, and I wish that there was a way out of this. I wish there's a way I could support my friends and support my boss and do what I need to do, but while also supporting myself and giving myself the time that I need to do the things that I need to do, so that my whole life isn't spent just like giving and pouring into everybody else and neglecting the things that I personally need. So when we get into boundary setting, it is like the thing that's, okay, here's where we can really not only pivot in our relationships, but start showing up more authentically, because we're being honest not only with ourselves and how we feel, but we're being honest with the people around us, especially in this moment where we're about to have a really difficult conversation.
Yeah, for sure. It can be very scary too. So like,
yeah. So obstacle number 1, we defined as being afraid of what others are going to think of you. For me, that's the first thing that comes up. Do you feel like for you too?
Yeah, that's definitely and it's like a massive obstacle for me, is just worrying about what other people are going to think.
Yeah, because then it's like, oh no, like as soon as I set this boundary, which we'll get into some examples, but as soon as I set the boundary, is everyone going to think like that I'm being a brat? Like, am I going to come off like I'm being a brat, or I'm just so entitled to my own time? Am I selfish now because I'm not answering their phone calls every second? Am I being combative because I'm trying to communicate to my boss like what workload I'm capable of performing? Is that going to make me look like I'm not efficient enough for the job? There's so many self-doubt things that could pop up, when the reality is you do want to be there for your friend. You only have so much time in a day to do XYZ in your job. All of your feelings are valid. And that's what I want to say first is when you know, like, my feelings are valid, and you really sit with yourself and ask yourself, well, do I literally not have any more time? Or do I need to carve out time in my day to go to the gym or to meditate or to do my personal health and well-being things that's going to allow me to perform better in my job? Like, how are you packaging it in your own mind? And what story are you telling yourself as far as why you're setting this boundary? Because when you know why you're setting the boundary and you know it's coming from a healthy place and a place that's going to benefit everyone involved, it becomes a little bit easier to then lean into that understanding when you're going and having that conversation. And being in that place will allow you to kind of, I don't know, like navigate probably the other person's response.
Yeah, and getting over that fear of being liked. And that's where I could really feel and resonate with that obstacle, is because ultimately I want to like come across nice and for people to accept me and feel good about the conversation.
Yeah.
So the idea of setting the boundary, are they going to think I'm being mean? And then am I going to be like shunned by them and outcast? And I think it takes on all these different things that it really isn't when your eye is focused on the benefits of this boundary and why it's important.
Yeah, because if you're going into it and your whole thought is like, if you're going into it and you feel like this person's going to think I'm being selfish and XYZ things, then when they give you that response, you're basically having your worst fear come true. When they initially respond that way of like, oh, it's coming off like that. Like the energy you put out is the energy you're going to get back, which is why I feel like it's so important to learn the skill of being grounded and centered, and why this is like a helpful thing to everyone involved. Because when you speak it from that place, hopefully it'll be felt from that place, received from that place, and or if it's received from the worst fear place, like they're thinking that you're being selfish, or now you're an unhelpful person or a person that doesn't care about them, XYZ, whatever the fear is, if they do actually receive it that way, if you're at least grounded and centered in why you're setting the boundary, then that will leave yourself room to, again, navigate that person's response. You won't be shocked by it. And the goal is that you're not surprised, you're kind of prepared, if anything, for them to have this negative response, so that you can help navigate them and educate them on your reasons as to why you're doing this. And that will come from a more vulnerable place, which I feel like people are a lot more receptive to, versus just, hey, like, you don't own me and control me, and like, I want to go to the gym. And it's like, okay, your boss is going to feel like that's an entitled attitude. Instead of you being like, hey, it's super important to me to like work out. I need that for my mental health. And when I work out, I feel like I come to work in a much better headspace, ready to tackle anything that happens in my day. Like, that's a much healthier way of like approaching a boundary setting, where then your boss then now has the opportunity to show their true colors. Like, are they hearing you from that place? And they understand that your goal is to perform in your job, and that's why you need this thing. And whether you explained yourself or not, hopefully your boss is going to say yes, like, you know, I respect you and I respect that. And that's what you're going to learn, right? So if your boss reacts, or your friend, or whatever the scenario is, reacts poorly, then maybe that's your time to say, okay, well, did I handle this from coming from my heart space and being well-rounded in the way that I communicated this? And if it's received poorly, then you then make that decision on, is this the healthiest work environment for me? What steps do I need to take next, right? But it all starts with you and the place you're coming from, and making sure that you understand why you're setting a boundary. That is the only way that you're going to protect not only the relationship, which I would argue that's what most people are afraid of, is like not only how you're going to come off, but the deeper reason is you're worried of how people are going to see you, is that it could throw the dynamic down.
Like the relationship could be ruined if I set this boundary. They could get mad at me. There could be backlash associated.
I could get fired.
I could get fired. This client will never work with me again, and I won't have their money.
I'm gonna upset my mom.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings me into number 2 with guilt.
Yes, guilt is another big one, because if you're so used to getting your validation from being needed and wanted and showing up for people, and you setting that boundary, being like, Mom, I can't talk to you every single day about this, like maybe once a week is more preferable. You could just feel guilty, like you're not there to help them with their whatever their issue is, or with a friend, and then you're putting it on you that like that person might spiral.
Yeah, because then if you are like absorbing all of that, so this is why like boundaries, I'm going to use like friends as an example, especially friends like going through a hard time. this is probably one of the hardest moments in any person's life where setting a boundary just sounds like so harsh or something, or it can feel harsh. Like you can feel that guilt of like, oh my gosh, this person needs me and I know they need me and they don't have anyone else to call or anyone else to depend on, and so like I need to help them, and if I don't show up for them, then they have no one. That is like the hardest moment for you to think. You don't want to think about yourself because you're like, well, I'm in a good place. This person's in a bad place. How selfish of me if they need me that I'm not going to show up for them every second that they need me. Like, obviously, that's what I need to do. That is when you're a super loving, caring, empathetic person, that's going to be your natural response, is to be there for that person. That does not mean that that's the right or the healthy way to approach this scenario when at the end of the day you're going to bed drained and wiped and unable to show up for yourself or show up for your kids or show up in your job, and then your own life you're sacrificing and not able to do the things that you need to do. So that's why we then talk about this boundary setting, because how can you navigate that? How can you be there for that person while also not letting it cross over that boundary, that literal boundary, that line, that then it starts trickling in, their energy starts trickling into your life, and now your own life is going down and everyone's sinking. The whole ship is sinking because that person is taking you down with them, right? So setting a boundary in a personal relationship like that, you know, it kind of just looks like making sure that you're carving out specific time. Like I think you gave a good example the other day. We were casually talking about this with like setting a coffee appointment or something.
Yeah, and just letting your friend know you care about them, you want to be there for them, but like let's set a specific time, maybe a coffee appointment where we dive into all these things. They feel heard, you feel like you showed up for them, and you're just like not available at any moment's notice for like a phone call that can lead to like an hour, 2 hour long thing.
Yeah, because if that person becomes accustomed to calling you and you're always picking up and you're always talking for 3, 4, 5 hours at a time, then they become dependent on that. And that's how codependent relationships are formed, is through neither person having any sort of guardrails or guidelines around like how we respect each other's time and mental headspace and energy. So asking someone, if you're the person going to call, or if that person's calling you and you know they're about to like dump a bunch of like emotional trauma or hurt or pain or whatever onto you, then that's just starting off the call before you call someone. If you're the person calling someone, saying, hey, do you have time? I want to make sure that I am calling you at a time where you're available to talk to me. Or that looks like, and allowing that person to be like, hey, actually now's not a good time. Could we talk about this a little bit later? Can I call you back tomorrow? Or saying, hey, thanks so much for like calling me and trusting me to talk to me about this. I have so much work on my plate, but I really care about you. If I look at my schedule and if I have some time, like once I put the kids to bed, could I give you a call back once I get the kids to bed? I'll probably have like 30 minutes to talk then. Like, does that work for you? Then you're setting a time limit on the call. You're letting them know, hey, I do care about you, but I also, you know, have other priorities in my life that I kind of already had on my plate today. So can I take care of those? And here's a time where I'm ready and mentally available to talk to you. And then they can feel that.
Yeah. It's like letting them know you want to show up for them, but like, here's what that's going to look like. Here are the parameters for what that is that really respects you and your time and your energy.
Yeah. In today's extended episode, we're going to do a lot of different role playing. So we're going to give more scenarios, kind of like that friend one, where we're very specifically saying, you know, this is an obstacle. This is a situation that will probably happen in your life with a boss or a friend or whatever. And then what is the exact response that you can have in order to set those healthy boundaries in a way that speaks from the heart and speaks to the bigger point. So hopefully in the extended, what you guys are going to take from that is how to connect those dots between this is the common scenario that happens in XYZ personal or professional environment. Here's how to connect that to why it's an issue and why you need to set a boundary. And then what is the thing that you can say that doesn't totally derail you or the person hearing the boundary from you or the relationship as a whole, so that you can kind of make sense and feel that sense of confidence in setting the boundary, because you've kind of already heard of every which way that it could go. So we will prepare you for those different scenarios. And I think that's a great way to spend the extended time.
Yeah, because I think people really see themselves through these different role-playing conversations.
Yeah.
And that'll help people a lot.
Yes. So 3, I was trying to think of 3. Obstacle number 3 that can come up is what?
So obstacle number 3 is societal norms and expectations around like roles that people play and
how we've been like conditioned to think you're supposed to behave or communicate. The first thing that comes to my mind is definitely the dynamic between children and parents.
That's what I was thinking too.
It's like, that's your mother or father. You respect them at all times.
Yeah.
And you only speak to them with respect. And it kind of translates with like a boss employee. I mean, both of those come to my mind. Just anyone who's in a position of power. You know, like if it's a traditional, like, society understands that. Like, you're the child and I'm the parent. Society also understands, like, you're the employee and I'm the boss. And that implies a level of kind of ownership isn't the right word, but I know that's kind of like what it feels like, is like this person controls me. Like, they have the power. Like, they have the power in this dynamic. So whatever they say goes. And I just have to be submissive. And
yeah, there's a level of like, you just need to keep quiet and do what you're told.
Yeah.
In both scenarios, like boss or parent-child dynamic.
Yeah. So that becomes an obstacle when you are an employee needing to set a boundary with your boss, or you are a child needing to set a boundary with a parent. And I know Andrew has really great examples in his own life, right? Like with...
Yeah, I can speak to kind of like the relationship with my mom and when we first met. And
when we first met so many years ago.
Yeah, so like I was in my late 20s and she was just very... I always thought it was like, oh, she just wants to help and she's like very involved. But
his mom is extremely caring.
Yeah. So what that looked like though is like I'm still on her phone bill, or like she can see my like bank account, which then if like funds get too low, she's just like transferring money, or like certain responsibilities I should have as a 28-year-old man. Yeah. I was just kind of leaning on her for, and she wanted to feel needed and that she was helping. That was just in her nature. But I was just allowing this dynamic to take on a form that it shouldn't have.
Yeah, and then I kind of entered the scene.
Yeah, Maris entered
Andrew
the scene,
and I met.
Said no.
Well, it's kind of just one of those things, like whatever you're used to and comfortable with, you may not realize that there is a different way or different lens of looking at it. And everyone comes from a different family and a different way of thinking about things and doing things. And it's whatever path that you're on up until a certain point where you meet someone that maybe came from a different place or a different culture or a different background or whatever the situation is, you're not really going to have like a different perspective until you come across someone with a different perspective, right? So for us, like, it was just very obvious when I was only 23 and I came from a very different household where I was completely self-sufficient. And not only was I working from the time I was like babysitting, I was babysitting when I was in 5th grade for my 5th grade teacher. And that's super extreme version of me learning how to be self-sufficient, make money, and start developing, you know, that sort of work ethic from a super young age. But certainly by the time I was 18, there was absolutely no question. Like, you're out of this house, you like, obviously, if there's an emergency, like, my parents are going to be there for me, but it was very understood from a young age, like, once I'm an adult, and even before then, I'm preparing to be an adult. So I'm working, I'm paying for my own car, I'm working multiple jobs, saving so that I can have a phone in high school, I'm paying my own phone bill, I'm being prepared to be let out into the world to where then I'm providing for myself. So working multiple jobs when I was super young and kind of having all these sort of baseline skills, which is probably why I was able to start my own company at 23 and it not fail, right? Mm-hmm. So when I met Andrew and Andrew's 28, I'm thinking in the mindset of like these sort of cultural type societal norms. Like, I'm the female, he's the male, like, he's 5 years older than me. Like, he's going to be even further along in this process. He's going to be the provider, and he's going to understand how to manage our money and invest our money and all these kinds of things. And not only did Andrew not have those skills at the point where I met him when he was 28, but immediately I started seeing, like, his mom having concerns about, like, because she's watching his bank account and like, is Maris contributing to anything, or are you just buying all the groceries because she saw the Publix charges? And I just remember being like, what in the world?
Yeah.
Like,
and looking
you're
back
still on her phone plan, and it was like boom, boom, boom. I was just like getting hit with these things. But I say all this to say, not to say like one way is right or wrong. I'm just saying that for us and for anyone else listening who's in a similar situation, we felt like it was affecting our relationship. Mm-hmm. And that's the moment when you know a boundary has to be set. If things were just like happy-go-lucky and it didn't have any sort of effect on our relationship or ability to grow or be self-sufficient adults building a life together, then maybe we wouldn't see the need for the boundary. But the reason why this is an example of boundary setting is because I think it's probably something a lot of people, especially young adults, deal with when they're transitioning between leaving the nest and going into that. So for me, it happened at a more traditional age, around 18. Mm-hmm. For you, we were kind of creeping into like, okay, you're almost 30, and not either person, either you or your mom or your parents have kind of set this boundary that kind of needs to happen, right, so that we can transition into a different dynamic.
Yeah. And I just remember how awkward and uncomfortable it felt right off the bat when I had to address that with her. But I had just through talking with you, like, had the level of importance that this boundary needs to be set was like so in my heart space that I knew it had to happen. So that helped me get through all that uncomfortable aspect of like addressing it with her and being like, I knew she was just coming from a place that she just didn't want to see me struggle. But yeah, in order for me to learn certain lessons, there has to be a level of struggle there. And she has to trust that like, I'm going to figure it out too, even if she's capable of helping me.
Yeah, because at some point, the goal needs to be that the child is learning how to be self-sufficient so that he can then show up as a husband and a father. And
yeah, that would be more of a help to me than actually just like providing for me.
Yeah. But it's understandable. Like, everything is like understandable. But that's kind of when we're trying to help you guys think about like, well, where does this, and that's, we give this example because it's probably the most vulnerable example we could give. Yeah. Because of how much, like, you obviously do not want to shame or hurt your parents' feeling when they're trying to just be helpful, right? And they're doing the best they can to, like, give to you and, like, help you be, you know, to their best of their skills and knowledge and what they're equipped to do to like help set you up. Mm-hmm. So when you come from these two different worlds where like my parents handled parenting just way different and saw it super differently, like that can create a lot of friction then when you have these two people who fall in love and come together and they come from different worlds. And then that creates obstacles within the relationship where you have to come together as a couple and find a way to set healthy, respectful boundaries. So we'll go a little bit deeper. That's definitely one of the examples we'll give in the extended in terms of like how we kind of navigated that and got through that in a way that kept all parties like safe and happy and good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just essentially finding a peaceful way of communicating. I love you so much and thank you for everything you've done, and now it's kind of my time to fail forward. Right? So professional settings, like super similar. It's, you know, how do you address your boss without getting fired and still come off as competent and capable of handling your role, and also understanding at the end of the day, like, it does not matter what scenario you find yourself in with these obstacles. The thing that you have to remember is something affecting your peace and your mental health and your physical well-being. And if the answer is yes, then that is how you say, okay, I may not know how to do it right now, but some sort of boundary has got to be set. And that is just what you have to do in life if you're going to sort of go into all the opportunities that come.
Yeah, exactly.
From it. So opportunities, let's talk about the opportunities, and then we'll head straight from that into the extended, because I know I'm sure I'm anxious now. We kind of started getting into the role playing. Like, I'm really excited about the extended because that's, you know, the nitty gritty. But if y'all see yourself in that, then here's some of the opportunities that happen once you kind of learn the skill of putting up those guardrails and guidelines.
Yeah.
And the first one, I personally feel, because what I always want to tie everything back to is self-actualization and getting to a place where you're a full and complete, fulfilled human being, then operating in society. If everyone can get to that place, then that's where I feel like we're all operating out of love and empathy and greater understanding. So it's actually the opposite of being selfish, and it's caring enough to develop yourself to be a human being that can then operate smoother,
right,
and navigate life smoother. So bringing it back to self, Andrew, what do you think is like the number one opportunity in setting boundaries?
Yeah, I like that you just said selfish, because I think on its face it does appear selfish, especially if you're a people pleaser. So tied to that, like the number one opportunity that jumps out at me right off the bat is the self-worth and the confidence tied to that self-worth that comes from setting that appropriate boundary.
So what do you feel like once you started setting boundaries, like what shifted for you internally?
Just a greater sense of respect for like myself, my time, my like this, that, and the other of
and you
myself.
feel like that like alleviated your guilt once you had a greater understanding of like why it's good to protect your energy. You feel like that gave you like a relief of like the guilt and worry.
Yeah, because then I felt like I could then show up more authentically and more intentionally with each situation, because I set the boundary. It's kind of like on my terms. That person has respected my boundaries, so there's that like mutual level there, and I just feel more confident because of that, not feeling like I'm obligated to show up in all these situations. I'm spreading myself too thin, kind of
well
thing.
Let's talk about that. So you say that you're setting it on your terms. So maybe if I'm a listener, I'm hearing that and I'm thinking, well, that sounds pretty selfish, because you just now you're trying to be the one that's like controlling everything. So when you say putting things on your terms, like how do you merge that with also making it a win-win? Like how is it a win-win? How have you found like navigating making it a win-win? So like that's great. You feel more confident, you feel more assertive, and you have more of a voice. But one of the things I'm so mindful of, and I've tried to help Andrew be mindful of, is like how to do this and navigate this without coming off like you have a chip on your shoulder. Because the last thing that anyone needs in this world is the people who felt voiceless to then come back with just as much or double the armor and weapons to come fighting back, right? Because that's just going to create more conflict and chaos. Like, what we need is that person learning, hey, that doesn't feel good, when they're kind of being controlling and dominant over it. But then the person who was a little bit lesser learns how to set boundaries, but doing it in a way that kind of softens everything and like creates like a safer space for everyone to operate. So what do you feel like when you say that? And you say like you kind of got things on your terms. Do you just mean more like you've set more clear guidelines that now you know if someone's operating in that they're respecting you? Like, do you also look for ways to respect the other person?
Yeah, there's definitely needs to be an acknowledgement of the other person. And to use my mom as the example, I didn't just come at her and be like, you set me up for failure because you didn't do X, Y, and Z. And like, now I'm like this. It was an acknowledgement of like, I love you and I appreciate you for you wanting to help me, because I know that's the space you're coming from in your heart. But like, now what I need is this. And like, that's where you set up in your terms. Like, I need a clear separation of like finances, for example, like my own phone bill. And in setting up that like boundary right there, I then feel more confident in my own abilities to show up in these areas. And then
so it's like teaching someone how to treat you. And then if they do show up that way, then you kind of have your answer. Like, great. Now we're...
Yeah, that's where I say like it's on my terms, which does sound selfish, but it is so much healthier.
It's just what you need in order. So when you say that, you just mean like you just know now that what you need out of the relationship is being respected.
Exactly. And it works great too with the friend example who's always calling you about their drama. It's like, okay, I do appreciate you and want to be there for you, but we've set up this coffee date now. So that's like your terms on where we can meet. They know that you've set aside this time to specifically talk to them. So they still feel like they're being heard and feel like special, and you're not just like putting them to the side.
Yeah. And if anyone's ever upset about you setting a boundary, then this is when the classic saying, like, well, I don't know how classic it is, but it's a great phrase, or it's a great quote, is the only people who are upset about you setting a boundary are the people who are benefiting from you not having a boundary. And that could not be more true. And this ties back to our good fences make good neighbors point when we first talked about boundaries in the emotional intelligence episode, is you're going to learn very quickly who has their own self-respect, and anyone who has self-respect and respect, like, over their own time and energy and how and respect of other people's time and energy, that becomes very evident very quickly, especially when you communicate your boundary. And you will learn, and that's the opportunity, is to like enjoy those relationships. Like, that's going to be number 2, is those like healthier, stronger relationships. You'll have those established because you know where they stand and they know where you stand, and everyone knows where the line is. And so, you know, as you're navigating each other, you're not walking on eggshells, because you know how to stay within the lines and make sure that you are respecting them and they're respecting you. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was great. And I love the good fences, good neighbors, because everyone knows how a good fence, it gives you the privacy and room to thrive in your own home. And just like in your own body and existence in this world, it does the same thing. And you're not just trying to keep people out and away. You're being just more selective over who gets in and how they get in. And then you form those more deeper relationships.
For sure. And then last but not least, before we get into the extended, just an overall opportunity when it comes to setting boundaries is reduce stress.
Yes.
And just like living, feeling like you can breathe. Like you were saying, like not always like anticipating that call from your boss or your friend or...
Yeah, before I knew how to set healthy boundaries, I kind of just always felt like I needed to cave into the whim of either the boss or the friends
or the client reaching out.
The client, yeah, and it carried with it so much stress and obligation and resentment, and you would show up for those people in each situation with your like happy face, but the second the phone hung up, you're like, oh, I can't believe they're like reaching out to me about this again. Yeah. And that's where you would be like, well, did you set the healthy boundary? And that there just like isn't room for that stress anymore.
Yeah.
Because both sides know the expectation and they respect the other side.
Yeah, and it's just, you're like, oh my gosh, I have all this time back. And it's not that I've sabotaged these relationships in the process, and that's why I have all this time, because I have no friends. Like, you will lose friends, and you absolutely will lose people from your life when you start setting boundaries, but that is wonderful. That's what you want. You do not want to be working for people, to be pouring into people who do not respect your time or your worth or your energy. You don't want that. So the more space that you create in your life for the right people and the right opportunities to come in, the better your life is going to be. And step one is just accepting and having radical acceptance that when you show up authentically, it's going to scare a lot of the wrong people away. The people that you might have convinced yourself were great people to have in your life. And that's where you have to ask yourself, who am I putting on a pedestal, and do they deserve to be there? So when you start living a life where you are pouring into yourself first, quite literally, and protecting your energy and your peace, you're going to have less stress. You're going to have better people in your life. You're going to have the clarity that you need because you have the time to be focused on the right things. And you're going to be surrounding yourself with the type of energy that you're going to be, filled with gratitude and able to kind of compound that positive energy instead of compounding all the negative.
Yeah. That's perfect.
Yeah, so we're going to jump over to the extended. You guys already know how to get there because we've told you a bunch of times. So if you're joining us, then we will see you shortly. And if not, then we'll see you guys in our next video.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, guys. Take care.